Suzette. Welcome to the Dark Night of the Soul Unwrap.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Me too. So I'd love to start differently than normal. Usually I ask somebody about their experience of the Dark Night of the Soul and so on. But I read something on your website that just really touched me that I think would be a great place to start to get us into this. You say, there are rich truths nestled in the darkness that long to be explored, brought to the surface, examined and healed. Both the light and the darkness are valuable. And for me, that was just such a beautiful summing up of what I think happens in a way in the dark night process.
Yeah, I think in our culture, typically we strive, I mean, and maybe all organisms do that, they strive for pleasure and that, that's a biological part of us. But I think it can be really rich when we look and see what else is there. And in our culture, we have a lot of we have a lot of convenience, a lot of ease, right? And it can make us think that that's what life is about, like just ease. But we look at nature, and winter is an important integral part of the life cycle, of the cycle of everything, right? We have to be able to let go and become fallow, right? Empty and open to that. Because when we're in that place, at least my experience, when I'm in that darkness, it almost feels like I'm just bones, right? I'm just emptiness. I'm just open. And there's a Zen, there's a Zen idea or the saying about the empty rice bowl. You can't fill something if it's already filled. So that if we're looking at the medicine wheel, the north it's about death. It's about, that emptiness. And that's when we can just become receptive. That darkness is receptive too, right? Like that feminine principle of receptivity. So yeah, I when the sun is shining, I love it on my face. And then when it's dark, I go to sleep and go into that deep realm of dreams. It's part of every day and every year, um, and every life, right? Over and over again.
Beautifully put. I'm smiling because you've just used a number of words that are in the Dark Night of the Soul book. This idea of this being part of the cyclical nature of life, this going down and in to the cold and dark, and that fallowness, I think is so countercultural, that we really have no sense of what fallow might mean, I think, until we're taken there, until we really have no choice but to go into the darkness and begin to see that there is receptivity in there, that
Mhm.
whilst we might look completely unproductive or however we construe that externally, there's something really important happening in that time where it looks like there's no movement in that fallowness.
Yes. And as you were saying that, it really brings to light for me this difference and this uniqueness of being human or being part of nature. We are not machines. And this idea, when you were speaking, I was thinking, yes, like this idea of slowing down or taking a break, it's almost counter to ideas of capitalism, which is always about growth and bigger and more and faster. So it's really like saying, what is right for me in this time? And that system doesn't really take that into consideration. We're not machines. We are living beings. And as such, we are part of that, the natural laws, right? That those are what are really guiding us. And I think sickness and dis-ease occur when we try to force ourselves to be something we're not.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm drawn back to what you said about rich truths in the darkness that long to be explored. And that was my experience and has been since my dark night experience. That it isn't simply that we're dropping into all of that somehow by default or because we've done something wrong, but that actually there's richness in there that's longing to be reconnected with.
Mhm.
W-
Yes.
What would you say? Yeah, would you share more about the rich truths that can be discovered in that place?
Yeah. Um, Again, so I think we have this tendency of avoiding things because they break us open when we look at them. They can be really painful. They can be super uncomfortable. They can destroy our sense of who we are, our ego. And so there's this almost like this soul longing. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And it's not because I want to punish you. It's because I want to see you grow and thrive and be like all that you came here to be. And so my experience is that when I've gone into those places, a lot of times it looks like seclusion and really examining. It's not just emptiness, although there is that sense of emptiness. It's also like, oh, look at this piece of you that you've really wanted to look away from and not look at. I guess that's more of like the shadow side, right? Those pieces that maybe they've kept us safe, maybe they've come from childhood beliefs and thought patterns and behaviors that they've served a purpose, but at this point, they're not, contributing to our soul's growth in that they're holding us back. So by exploring them, they do, because when we explore them, they transform. Yeah, anything that I look at, it starts to change, it starts to shift. So that initial impulse to look away or to feel like, "Ooh, that's uncomfortable. That doesn't make me feel good." But if we can kind of breathe through it and be like and turn towards it and hold it in our hand and have compassion for it, then it has a chance to unfurl or transform into something that can like be medicine that we can carry with us and walk forward in a new way.
I love the word unfurl. I think
Mm,
that's perfect because I think when we're so used to that moving away from, aren't we? I mean, that's what we do. And I think to some extent what our whole ego structure or whatever we want to call that is designed to do, isn't it? To not go near everything that begins to surface in
mm,
these times. And yet, as you said, there's a soul longing for that. And I
mhm,
think certainly in my dark night, even fairly close to the beginning, there were times when there was a deep recognition that there was a soul profound longing on that soul level. And it took a little while for me to really sense or get that what my soul was longing for is everything you just described, everything that had to get sort of hidden away in some way or cut off from or disowned and put in the shadow. Because I think in the beginning of this process, very often that being broken open feels shameful, right? Or wrong, or, not being what we think we're supposed to be and all of that. Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about your specific experiences of being
mm.
in that place.
Absolutely. Yes. Those ideas of like those feelings of shame and rejection and I'm trying to think of one of the situations that comes to mind most recently, like, um, my oldest daughter, she passed away in 2018. Um, and that was one of the biggest fears in my life. Like, I've lived through a lot, I've experienced a lot, but I was like, don't ever, it's one of those things like, never, ever, ever do I want to experience that. And, um, yeah, first off, it was shocking because I knew she was struggling, but I didn't expect, no one expects that, I think. You know what I mean? When it comes out of nowhere. But she was struggling on many different levels, and she pretty quickly had spiraled into drug abuse, and there was no way to stop it. Every time I tried to do something, it felt like it just made it worse, or and I tried to get her into counseling. It was really just out of my control. But that shame of feeling like I couldn't protect my daughter, that I couldn't save her, that I couldn't fix, or I couldn't love her in a way that she felt um, supported, all those things, supported and cared for. And yeah, like,
Mm.
and, in that, it's not like a magic thing that just goes away. It's like I carry that and I let it go and I carry it and I grieve. So I was thinking about that. I'm like, is that it's almost like a it's like a long dark night of the soul. Because it's not just something that you drop down into and then, it's acceptance over and over again, if that makes sense, of what is, and knowing that I'm human and I'm not like, yeah, I don't, maybe that's not a good example, but that's what came to my mind, that,
Mm.
that just that shame, that sense of like, oh, like, how could I have done, like, let that happen? How could I have, even though I was doing everything I could to try to fix it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge, first of all, just the immensity
Yeah.
of what you just shared. Thank you. And I know what it's like to be faced with the possible loss of your child, and how deeply that touches into all of those ideas about everything you just shared. The idea of that somehow we've done something wrong, or somehow we should be able to save them. And I could recognize in my own dark night process that I'd been trying to make a bargain, as it were. There'd been a real sense of bargaining, like, you can have anything else, but you can't have him. And when illness has come in repeatedly to threaten that, I know what it's like to live with that fear, and how that takes us down so deeply into those inner recesses of who we think we are, or all of that. My sense is we can't go through anything more transformative.
Yeah. So that, yeah, yeah, exactly. That bargaining and that sense of, as I just kind of reflect a little bit back, I remember having, I don't know if it was a dream or a vision, like I was walking her, and it was a dusty path and it was really just, but it was like I was walking through this and I just that sense of I had wonderful people around me, but it felt very alone for me. Yeah, just this sense of like something I had to do like on my own, but not on my own. You know what I mean? Like looking at those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a degree to which this descent into the darkness, however it comes about, is a process that on some level we have to do on our own.
Hmm.
I think it's almost impossible for that not to be the case because of the nature of it. And of course, I think it's immensely helpful if we have got support and community as we do that. And I'm really glad that you've had that. And I'm really aware that there will be people listening to this who don't have that. And I want to acknowledge just how hard that is. And that this is a solo descent. Having experienced such a such a powerful thing in your life, how did that change your perception of the darkness?
That specific journey, um, it has shifted basically my perception of reality or life. We mostly walk in this realm of the 3D, of the physical, and there's multiple different levels, and having lost somebody on this physical realm in that way, but also still feeling connected to her and having that sense of um, connection and experience and like can feel her sometimes, you know what I mean? So strongly. And also just those waves that I ride, some days it's like really dark and heavy. And that's what I'm saying. It's sort of like, I don't know if it's a great example of a dark night of the soul because or maybe it is. It's like the big dark night of the soul, because I don't feel like there's an ending to it I mean, there is, but it's also like I go back, you know what I mean? Rather than a full like dive down and then a rise up. Is that making any sense?
That's making complete sense. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I think it comes back to what we were saying about the dark
yeah.
night as a natural phenomenon, that it's cyclical rather than linear. And and of course
Rather
grief is like that
yes.
too, right? That we know that there isn't an end to the nature of grief in that way either. So I think it's a perfect example in a way because of that, because of what you just said about knowing that one day you'll be in the darkness and the heaviness, on another day you'll be somewhere else. And I think there's something about starting to shift, to orientate towards that rather than some idea of overcoming. Yeah, that we come into this terrain where it's okay that we're feeling what we're feeling, even if what we're feeling isn't okay. There's an okayness with the feeling of it.
Yes, yes, yes. Before that experience, that's what, I feel like I've had a lot of dark nights of the soul. Like you said, cyclical, and it's accepting and allowing that, and then kind of rising back up into that sense of like, well, this is what it is. It's acceptance, it's surrender. There's days where I just, I'll think back to a moment having older children too at this point, all their baby selves. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of tricky to figure out how, like, to differentiate. So I think it's interesting to explore the differentiation between grief and a dark night of the soul. Um, I was kind of letting that mull around in my brain, and I feel like my experience has been in other situations where there is a dark night of the soul, there is a grieving because there is a letting go, even if it's not necessarily a person, but parts of ourselves or ideas that we had about who we were, or and I do want to I will get back to that experience with Sienna, my daughter, but I want to kind of go back in time a little bit into a relationship with my ex-husband, and there were experiences with him that were I wanted to blame it all on him because um, for many reasons it was really unhealthy, and he was doing things that were unacceptable, and I started to look at my part in that, and that was huge for me because I felt justified in all my behavior. And so looking at that, I was so resistant to doing that though, because I was like, yeah, but he's doing this. But it didn't change what I was doing. It didn't give me a pass to all this behavior that I was doing. So once I started to look at that without this sense of shame, rather than just accepting it like, oh, wow, like I learned this, or I had beliefs like this. There was grief in letting that go. It was painful because I had to change my behavior, which is really hard. I don't know if you've ever had to,
Yeah.
this, yeah, it's like, whoa, that's really hard. Like, you know, practicing what I preach, really like, okay, this is the person that I want to be. And so then stepping into that and acting in that way. But it was also a grief in accepting that he can't be who I want him to be, or, in that moment, and that's okay. Like, that's not, I don't have to shame him either, because he's on his own soul journey. And I don't know what that's supposed to be. So me taking responsibility, all that, there was a part of grief there of letting go of who I was and how I behaved and those types of things. And then as I was looking back with Sienna, that experience, I feel like it was sort of, whereas the other, the marriage, that was sort of like a slower kind of descent into that. And I feel like with Sienna, there were certain things that were happening with her that were sad. But when when she left this planet, this earth plane, it was sort of like, no, it wasn't sort of like, it was a plunge, like nothing I've ever experienced. Like my heart just cracked open. There was like instantly, it was, because it's shocking and it's, um, overwhelming. And I don't, time, I can't say how long it was, but I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to stay in bed. I didn't want to eat, like, so it was sort of like they have initiations in a lot of indigenous cultures where people fast and stay in the darkness or meditate. Like it was like that, but it wasn't a choice. It was almost like I was sent there, like, I mean, not like sent by somebody else or, but it was sort of like, um, I remember people telling me I had to eat. And it was like, I didn't want to eat. It was like, I didn't want, I felt like it was like a betrayal. I felt at that point, felt like a betrayal to eat because it was connected to this world. And I just wanted to stay connected to her. But I did. I remember eating like a raspberry, and it was almost like it grounded me into this body in this world. So I don't think I've ever like as I'm telling you this now, like I don't think I've ever looked at it in that way, like comparing it to like a vision quest or something before, but as I'm talking with you now, it's making a lot of sense. Like, because I was in a different state for several days. in and out of dream, like she was with me walking, you know. Um, and I felt like that moment of eating the raspberry was sort of like putting me in this body, and it was almost like, it was like being able and I felt this sense just walking in multiple worlds from that point. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, I think there is something in this experience, however it comes about, and I really get the difference between the sudden plunge that you went through with Sienna to this more gradual, I think when something, the very thing that for any parent, for any mother, we would most fear, and certainly that's the case for me. I don't think there can be any deeper plunge. And I think there's something about the dark night process that does bring us into the other world. I mean, in the book, I talk about now having a foot in both worlds in some way. That there's something of that in the experience, however that comes about, whether that's related to somebody else in that specific way or not. I think that is what it takes us into. That it's I come back to your phrase, this soul longing for connection there as well as here.
Mhm.
And I think it does take us often in quite stark ways out of the kind of business as usual mode of being in this on this plane into somewhere else where the same things just don't apply. Like I think there's almost a sort of a literalness to the fact that we're somewhere else at least part of the time. And that's hard to explain. It's understandably concerning for other people, right? When they're seeing us not sleep or sleeping loads or not eating or whatever it is we're doing. But yeah, I mean, the word initiation, understanding that we are somewhere that is part of the human experience, like that people over
Mm.
hundreds,
Mhm.
thousands of years have been experiencing this. And as you said, some cultures have much better ways at being with that than we currently do.
Yeah, and what also occurs to me as we're talking about that is that visceral experience. It's not just like heady, it's not just emotional or spiritual. It's like like something you can feel in your body. Like I mean, and the only thing that comes to mind as I think of the intensity of the physical experience is childbirth. You know, especially as you move through transition where, you know as a mom who's given birth, you understand what I'm saying when you get to that point where the sensations are so intense, it almost, like, takes you away, you're in a different plane, you're almost, like, having to focus so much. I don't know for you, I know a lot of moms that have experienced that transition place is also a place of, I don't wanna do it. I can't do it." Like, it almost feels like, "Nope." Like, "Can we go back on this?" Like, and there's nowhere to go but forward through it, and that was the same experience that I had when, I lost Sienna, and in other experiences of that dark night, there's also been a sense I think we talked about that at the beginning of like, "Oh, I don't wanna look at that," But you always have to go through it, and you feel so alone, but it's almost like by surrendering to it, you realize that you're supported by ancestors and spirit guides and source, God, whatever you call it, like, there's something else beyond the self, and I can't prove that, but I know it's real, like
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I love that. analogy with birth. I've not really thought about it like that before, but that, yes, absolutely. I mean, I remember giving birth and being at that point and thinking, this is impossible. There is no conceivable way I can do this. And yet knowing on some level that something would just take over. I think what makes it such a great comparison is that sense that we cannot know ahead of time how it's going to happen. And having no sense of what might happen within the next 5 minutes, let alone, the next hour. No, I think the Dark Knight is like an elongated version of that. Absolutely. And even though we're struggling to work out how we can get through it ahead of time, somehow nature takes its course and something happens and we do move through in whatever way we're moving through in the moment.
Yes, and I think that's the other part that I noticed. You're right, like, staying present with it. It staying present in anything is kind of unnerving because you don't know what's gonna happen next, but from what I've found, when I do stay present, it's like it's so interesting to me, but, like, through that dark night of the soul, I'll hear a song, or I'll meet somebody, or, I'll get a letter, or something will happen that kind of shifts things that I couldn't have planned on my own, and it's like, I can't prove that there's God, source, the divine, I can't prove that, but I don't know what this is that pops up and that shifts the trajectory. Maybe it's just that soul, right? The animus mundi, the soul of the world that's kind of guiding this part of my soul in a certain direction, that connection between the two. Um,
I can't stop nodding at all of this. I mean, there is something, I think, once we start to get a little bit more acclimatized to the felt sense of that. I mean, you use the word visceral, which is one of my favorite words in this. I think it's so important to recognize the viscerality of this. So this is nothing to do with some beliefs or ideas in any way, really. They're very much secondary. I think that once we start to experience those things in the way that they come in the way that you just described, I can remember in the early days of my Dark Night, I was really drawn to watching. There was a TV show with a medium on it, classic thing really. He'd go and he had a studio audience and he'd do the thing of relaying messages and talking to people. And I'd never been remotely interested in that sort of thing before. For 6 weeks, I had to watch it every day. And I think that was the first time that I really just said to myself, okay, I'll just do it. I'm not gonna over question this. I'm not gonna go into sort of analyzing it. I'll just do it. And I did that for 6 weeks and then it kind of stopped and I never really thought about it again. I couldn't really articulate what it was in those 6 weeks, even now, except the knowing that that's what I needed to do in that moment. And something was coming in through that felt really important
mm,
in that time. And as you say, it could be all sorts of things. It could be something you read or a song or something that you see or an experience in nature. It could be a million different things. And often they're not things that we would necessarily think of as sort of healing. And yet the way that they come in is healing in some way.
yeah, yeah. It's like, guideposts or affirmations of some sort, that I mean, we're meaning-making beings, right? So these pieces, whether, I can't explain why it happens, but they appear in our consciousness. Like we see them or we hear them and we pull them together and a story forms. At least that's my experience. So while I might feel alone in that dark night place, it's almost like these little lights are kind of guiding my way. And that helps me to surrender a little bit more, to trust that I'm not alone, even though I don't see a physical person or have like specific directions. It's sort of like I'm being led on a path of kind of integrating all that was and all that will be.
Beautifully put. Yeah, as you describe that, I get this sense of like these little lights just lighting up one or two ahead of where we are.
Yeah.
So it's never that we can see the whole
Ugh.
path ahead of us, but just enough to know, oh, okay, this is the next step. And that might be the next step in 5 minutes. It might be the next few days. I mean, who knows what the time scale of that is in any given moment, but that there's just enough of a sense of, ah, okay. And I think there's something about the way that we become attuned to that that definitely grows over time. I mean, when it first starts happening, I think it feels quite crazy often. And yet, when we start to trust it, I mean, it just becomes how we live.
And there's a trusting in the waiting. We were talking, I was thinking that it's like I don't always get that immediate light or that immediate, but it's like I maybe, the more that I've kind of gone through these experiences, the more I'm like, oh, this isn't an action time. This is a waiting time. And the waiting time isn't always often not comfortable. Part of like, there's that fear of like, I've been abandoned, I'm alone, I'm in this darkness, there's no way out. No one's, but it's like, oh, okay. If you've gone through it a few times, right? Like, you're like, oh, okay, this is just the waiting time. There is going to be a light that comes, and what I've also found is when I trust that and can soften into it, it's almost like those lights. It's almost like part of the lesson or something. Just that uncomfortableness of the waiting is like a lesson in itself.
I love that you've brought that in because there can be days or times in this process where there's insight and revelation and realization and big releases and there's sobbing or there's whatever's going on. And other times, like you say, these waiting times when it's like, there's not really very much moving or there's nothing being seen particularly. There's none of that um, realization of rich truths or like nothing is really happening. And I think it's so good to acknowledge that that's part of it. Like if that's happening, it's absolutely just part of this, that there will be, coming back to the word fallow, there will be these times when it's like nothing is going on and it feels like there's no any sort of notion of progress or even process.
And as we talk about that, I think I get that sense of the medicine wheel again. That north, that time of emptiness, of cold and winter, and then it comes back, that spring, the light, the sun starts to rise, we get some vision, and then we get into that summer and things are just flourishing and we're getting all these insights and then again we go back and we start to let things go. Just to bring that back, I feel like the dark night of the soul kind of follows that as well, that cycle, and the cycle of the seasons and yeah.
And I think there are cycles of it nestled within the larger
Yes. Yeah.
cycle, right? That we can see that as a sort of an overarching arc,
Mhm.
and then these
Mhm.
sort of mini goes around the medicine wheel in
Exactly.
in amongst all of that. I love that. There was one more thing that I wanted to touch on, which I really wanted to bring in um, another quote from your website. You say, when we rediscover our sacred wild selves, we
Mm,
embrace the fullness of who we are. And for me, reconnecting with that wildness, I think is such a massive part of this. And it's something that we don't talk about that much. I'd love to hear more of your sense of that.
yeah, I feel like, well, I know our reality, our culture has been constructed. It's been formulated. We are told what is acceptable and what's not acceptable and what's right and what's wrong. But if we step into nature, there's a natural rhythm, a natural order. And I think it kind of circles back to where we started talking in the beginning of this idea that we're not machines. We're not supposed to get bigger and more and faster, and that's not human. That's not nature. That's not our wildness. Our wildness goes in cycles and spurts and dormancy and aliveness and flourishing and birth and death and all those things. Um, so when we kind of reconnect to that wildness, we're stepping out of this consciousness of construction, human construction, and stepping back into our bodies and into our visceral experience. Like, wow, what am I feeling? Like, rather than having a clock or a calendar tell us what we need to do in each moment, we're coming back home to our bodies and we're listening and we're trusting those subtle guidances again and being like, oh, okay, like I'm feeling the impulse to do this, or um, I'm inspired to say that, without one of the things I do, I facilitate ecstatic dance journeys, and the purpose of that is to give people a space, like weave a sacred space, really, for people to know that, okay, one, this is a portal into another world that is where you can feel and say and move your body however you want. There's no right or wrong here. If you want to roll on the ground or jump up and down or like shake, it we don't have places like that in our culture. So I create this kind of this container to explore what it means to be me. What is it like for me to trust those impulses in a safe container? So that's, to me, that's tapping into that sacredness, that wildness that is inherent in us, but we've just forgotten it, or kind of it's been domesticated out of us, right? Like,
Absolutely. The word that comes up for me a lot is untamed. Know that there's been a taming or a domestication of that quality. And I think going in, living at least part of the time in the other world that we've been talking about, and the uncovering of what's in the darkness is a kind of rewilding, and seeing the way that construction, so-called civilization, has really tamed that in all of us in different ways. I think there's something about the return to even having any kind of experience or notion of all of those things you just described. Like, how might I feel if I was could just feel anything? If it was all right for me to actually be exactly as I am just now. That's in a different context. That's how I work with people one to one very often. And it's that same thing, that contained space in which it's okay to be as you are just now, whatever that is, and that can look any any which way that happens to be. And my sense is that it's by including or inviting, or as you say, embracing the fullness, that we actually get to see the miraculousness of ourselves.
Yes, yes.
That when we're kind of seeing ourselves as just this different, weird kind of mix of different things that we think we're supposed to be, we miss that, like the gloriousness, like the amazingness, the fact that we're here as this,
Right.
right?
Yes, yes. Exactly. Yes. So often we're so focused. And I think the culture itself is kind of tamed or um, guided into focusing just on the physical. But like you said, like when we open up to the fullness, and I think that's part of that initiation into these different levels and states of consciousness. It's like we shift, right, into this creative realm or this dream realm or this emotional realm. And we can do it all without shame or judgment or rightness or wrongness. And when we embrace the fullness, then we get to like really thrive. We become alive, right?
And just to say, this is within this, there's all the mundane and ordinary too. I was just thinking it might sound to people like we have these sort of incredible lives, right? I mean, speaking for myself, and I'm sure it's the same for you, you know, I had the dishwasher repairman round a couple of hours ago. I'm going to go downstairs and clean up the kitchen in a moment. So we're not talking about some kind of outlandishly brilliant existence on that level. But I think there's something of the wonder of the all of it that comes in, that being us, being this life, in this circumstance, can be all of those things.
Yes, yes, yes. Chop wood, carry water, right?
Right. Yeah. Just before we finish, I'm just wondering if there's anything that you'd like to share for anybody who's really in it
Mm.
just now.
Yeah. I would I would just encourage you to take a deep breath, hold it and exhale, and just know that it's safe to be in this present moment and those lights will appear in many different forms, however they do. And it's safe to trust in those things and to keep your heart open and your mind open and trust that you're provided for and you're loved and supported because you have ancestors around you guiding you. You have the divine God source, whatever you want to call that, that has a plan for you and your soul knows the direction. So softening into and trusting that guidance. You are loved. Yeah.
Beautiful. Suzette, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fiona. This was wonderful. This was so helpful for me too, just to communicate, just to kind of explore this with someone else on the path. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.